Do it.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Deb Helfrich. We're on hashtag Deeper with Deb. Jared is going to introduce himself because I don't like to do bios. I want to hear what the person feels like they want to say about themselves. But I will congratulate him. This is show number 9, and he is the first non-Black or brown person.
Yay.
So
Hey,
we are changing the rules on Deeper with Deb right from the very start.
Well, hey, I love just jumping right in as one of my favorite storytellers, Michael Margolis, says, "Go deep, quick."
Yes.
So we're not messing around. So yeah, Jared, Karol here, coming to you live from Oakland, California, across the bay, and we found out. I found out this morning, not too far from where you used to live back.
It was really, really incredible.
20 years ago.
You know, because I had scrolled your profile at one point, but then none of us have the memory for all these things, and we've just basically first conversation. We've just been around the commenting section on LinkedIn every now and again. So one of the things that has been the theme as well is that I'm recording first conversations. And I think this is a really good, there's no scripting, there's no,
Love it.
Again, jobs are going to go extinct this summer, I think. So, we're in this place of real freedom, and if things are going to change, it's right now. Getting into the heart of, we cannot keep harming humans to the extent that we do, both very consciously and so inadvertently. Work is poison. The way it is right now, the way that corporate America has, nobody intended it for it to get this bad. But show me the study that says humans can work for 40 hours a week from age 17 and 18 until 70. And when your right livelihood, because what you do every day when you go to work, that is the biggest chunk of every American's life. And now both partners, everyone's working. This is the root cause of why so quickly in the world of notifications has went bizarrely wrong. Our biology, our physiology. So again, I can go way up into the energy. This ability to modulate our own biology, physiological, emotional state, it's all back and forth and back and forth. When you go into these offices, I had to basically leave corporate America because I became allergic to cigarette smoke and petrochemical scents, the dryer sheets. I worked in payroll. I had deadlines. I had 10,000 people to get paid at the bank, and I go in an elevator and it would be sort of right there. And Genentech was the last place I worked over in South San Francisco. Famously quite rich for cancer treatments, and yet every morning I'd have to go through a moat of cigarette smoke, and then I'd end up in the elevator with somebody with a dryer sheet, and I'd be throwing up. How? This is kind of this is cognitive dissonance. I'm working for a company making an immense amount of money treating cancer, and they're giving me cancer before I've even gotten to my desk. And again, I had asked, I'm like, do I ask the receptionist? How do I talk about the fact that we're not obeying the state law of California? Nobody's going 25 feet away. When we bring this into racism, when you see that whole, if we can't figure out how to physically stop people from smoking, when we know it's making everyone ill, when it's something as subtle as racism, there are people like you and I who truly, truly care. But then the languaging all just goes berserk, and we're not really getting to the bottom of solving. Laws have been around since 1865. Come the fuck on. More laws are not really what's going to fix this. It's my belief that people need to see a white person actually fully enmeshed in the ability to talk to any Black or brown person, demonstrating racial harmony, demonstrating, modeling. This is how you pull apart this wall that's there. Here's how this sort of, we've all become so polite, so politically correct, that conversation is it's useless. It's just like a bunch of emojis in a comment section. It's really a waste of human energy. So over to you.
Wow. So
how do you roll after that?
Yeah, so much good stuff. Gosh, where to jump in? Let me So the work I do
Mhm.
is, and I think why I'm interested in this conversation and well, in this topic, but especially this conversation with you, is as a white person, as a cis straight man white person, right? Compounding privilege,
Yeah.
times however many exponentially, dimensions you want to go. It's, you mentioned something in that bit about, the personal development. I don't know if you said those words exactly, but like, how do how well does each of us understand ourselves,
Yep.
right? And how willing are we to self-reflect, to self-actualize, to elevate our awareness, to think, to be mindful, to, all these things. Call them spiritual, call them whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
But I think, and this isn't unique to white people, but if we're talking about racism, it is. I think a lot of people don't do that work just in general,
Mhm.
right? For various reasons, who knows why, upbringing, stress, don't want to, don't have to, privilege, all kinds of things. And I think when it comes to like some of the things that you're talking about around interracial relationships and understanding people, and there was a great article by Ibram Kendi just recently in the Atlantic talking about Ahmaud Arbery, that Black people are afraid of white people's fear.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't really thought of it like that. But when he articulated it so clearly, it was like, that's what it is. So they're afraid of being shot and arrested and all these things. And the reason that exists is because white people are afraid of them to some degree or another. And that was a really, I mean, this was yesterday or Tuesday. I mean, something really recently that I read this, and it was like, oh, it just kind of clicked. Because my philosophy, personally and professionally, both for myself, but also with my coaching clients and everything, is you got to do your personal development work. And the fact that you don't do it, especially if you're a senior leader with influence and power and privilege and visibility, it's actually, it's more than just like, oh, too bad, you're not becoming enlightened. No, it's not about that. It's about, you're actually harming people by not doing this work. And so, that's the challenge, is how do we get people to do it?
Well, I'm gonna say there's not a challenge. I'm gonna come completely differently. Now, first of all, 100% big props to Dr. Kendi. I bet at some point he and I are gonna be working together. Because I refuse to ever identify as an ally, only until he put out, okay, yes, I've been an anti-racist since I was 17. And the reason I can say 17 is I grew up in, now officially searchable on Wikipedia, I grew up in a 98.5% white community in Ohio. Certifiably had absolutely not a single human soul who taught me the first 17 years of my life what diversity meant. I think that was a feature.
Mm-hmm.
I chose what screens I consumed. I can say the very first person who taught me racial harmony was Lenny Kravitz's mom. And she did an excellent job. Roxy Roker was so fierce in the Jeffersons, and that there could be love between her and this doughy white guy who I could identify with. Okay, done. Do you see how easy it is? We're making this very difficult. Kids are not born racist. So what we have to do is get rid of all the messaging, teaching kids, and then we need to take the adults. And again, go do your own professional development while you're in your own space. And when I hear the phrase, white people do the work, I'm like, please God, don't have the white people go off by themselves. They've gotten it wrong for hundreds of years. It's just not going to resolve itself. What has to happen is, and this is really my mission in uniting the globe, is we gotta basically come back to science. We're now in America, show me the science. The science of melanin completely proves that it is idiocy to consider melanin in all of this convoluted socio-cultural, again, I try not to cuss very much, but I get so, I don't know what to
It's
call
okay.
it, but shit. It's a shitty bunch of prejudices.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily when white people say they and are experiencing fear of Black people, they're experiencing fear of the socioeconomic dynamics that Black people were for. Not the person, The
Exactly.
environment, they're afraid of the guns and the drugs. They're afraid of these messages they get on the screen. Now, we both lived in Oakland. I've never, ever, Oakland, I've been to Harlem, I lived in DC for quite some time. I have traveled in Africa. I have never felt scared when I've been the only white face in a large environment. It is not this message that we're getting from the media. And if a white person has never found themselves in that environment, how do they even know? What are they, they're assuming some story is real. So when I hear do the work, what I want to come in and say is, you've got to go put yourself and mesh yourself. And maybe it is an Indian wedding. Maybe it is dim sum on a Saturday in a real Chinese restaurant. It's, you know, again, I think Jared and I are pretty good at speaking right directly upon African Americans, and it's good because those are the extremes. So we mean to include everyone in the different, you know, in-betweens, but that's really the poles. The Arctic and the equatorial pole is black and white in America. There's no other place where you're finding as much complete fear and tension and reverse fear. And African Americans have to live with this veil of trying to keep white people calm. Because the second the white person is not calm and they just express themselves, then it's like it's a boiler pot. It's impossible to be a human. And that's again why I just keep going, because you have to figure out how to let people be in their feelings. There is an incredible amount of feelings around racism that I, as a white person, do not take personally. When I am with an African American person, I want them to feel that full force of that anger and frustration, and that is something I don't think is as hard as many white people think it might be. It's the perception of how hard it is, because that anger is not going to be forced on you directly. If you're sitting there, listen, if you're being the person who is saying we're cool, they need to get that out though, because it's been microaggression after macroaggression after plain old fucking being pulled off a bus. I don't know how. I couldn't live in those conditions. I would not be a productive adult if I somehow got switched around and had to figure out how to navigate America. We're constraining so many minds, so many hearts, and it's just gotta stop. So the science is, melanin is a superpower. I got plenty of melanin. They're called freckles. It's the same substance. Freckles are melanin. So right here, right now, I believe that one little phrase for people who are struggling, they don't feel that they're prejudiced, but they're never really getting the handle on how to start speaking about it. We all got melanin. It can be as pale as I am. You've got melanin. Melanin is actually an organic molecule that is in nearly all life. You leave out some insects. My giraffe cousin, so a lot of why I bring Africa into the mix is giraffes and freckled redheads are exhibiting the same patterns of melanin. This changes the dynamic. Well, wait a second. Now we don't have all this human melanin is so crucial to all life, and let's stick with mammals because now everyone's going zebras. Okay. What does melanin do? It tells us how much sunlight a mammal needs to be optimally healthy. Soon as we tie melanin into the actual epidemiology crisis of the diseases affecting African Americans far more, we now have a positive way to start going, it's really important to talk about skin color because it is affecting the health, and affecting the health is affecting the capacity of Black and brown people to actually learn, to actually go to work. And then you add on all of the cultural level. So the cultural level, I think, fixes itself when we come in and start talking about this as a human health crisis. I mean, again, the virus has just put this agenda right in the front. That's why I'm just energized every day. I'm like, somebody's gonna start listening to me. This message is going to get out. And as a philosopher, I can take it. I can take serious debate. You know, you can't get me in my feelings about this in a way that I become reactionary. And you can make me start crying over, hatred and things like that. But then I'll be like, what? Again, we all have melanin. I think that we're so different. We most certainly are not. So.
I mean, I love it. I could listen to you talk about this, and I agree with probably 99%. I think,
and I'm not searching for. That's the other thing as a philosopher, that most people want this
agreement.
They're like, it's all, and I'm like, please come back. Where do I need to put some context, do some more explaining? I love that stuff.
Well, I think that's what I imagine we'd be doing for this chat. I think so. Scientifically, I agree with you. Race is a socially constructed thing. If you've read Ibram Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning, or The History of White People from Nell Painter, those books, and I'm sure dozens other books and articles and science have proven that, the idea of whiteness was created as a social, political, supremacy thing from the Portuguese back in, was it the 1400s, slave trade. And I'm not like a historical scholar by any, or an academic, but, so that's pretty clear. And I think, are there people that, think it's a scientific thing? Of course there are. Eugenics and the whole thing, it's still life. So we know, and a lot of people know that that's bullshit. Mm-hmm. To me, that isn't the problem. The problem is the very real socially constructed and socially upheld supremacy of it, from political leaders, from corporate leaders, from people in power. What we're talking about right now, they don't care about that. And even if they say they do, they don't. And they're not going to do, back to our earlier discussion, they're not going to do the work to go, oh, you know what? God, I am really upholding white supremacy. I am actually racist, even though I'm not a bad person. Like, people don't do that. So they might go, yeah, sure, Deb, I get it. Like, melanin, okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to agree with that. But to me, that's not the heart of the issue. The issue is socialization and an unwillingness to unlearn and relearn what we've all been taught. From however, I don't know, we look maybe the same age, 40s, 50s, like, how do we, and I have 11-year-old twins, so I'm like, what are they going to grow up thinking, learning, understanding? I'm trying my best to educate them, but they're their own people. So it's like, how do we address it on, we have to address it and attack it on so many different levels and angles and kind of perspectives.
So 100%. It's the whole culture. What I feel that is where I'm coming from is much more about, instead of it's all wrong, is let's just really celebrate where it's right. Mm-hmm. Let's honor that there's this person who's spent her whole college able to just show up after having grown up for 17 years in an entirely white environment and end up being open to everyone. I do remember I lived in a quad, and I chose that. And one of my roommates happened to be from Ghana. And I was skipping around, happy. And luckily enough, the response was pretty much just like, stop.
Who's this weird white chick?
Nobody came at me with any sort of, negative, but it was sort of like, why on earth would that be the thing that she cares about? Mm-hmm. And I was just like, this is and Julie and I reconnected on LinkedIn last fall, and she is like the CEO of a bank, much more successful than I am. It's very important to have these kinds of social conversations going on. And we all can't do everything. So again, I wanted to make sure that you didn't have a sort of, business contract situation where I wanted to keep myself in check, because otherwise, to
not
me,
at all.
It's the social aspect of right thinking adults just going, oh, this is what it looks like. We learned English from absorption. You can absorb, I get it. I now see how I was holding myself tense, which was not making the discussion natural. Whereas I see her just going, this is any word, any phrase, willing to just say, this is how life has been for me.
Yeah, and what you're talking about, I think, if I'm hearing you right, is the normalization of
normalization of the normalization
of whatever, you know,
of a white person loving Black people,
of interracial relationships.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with the word love. I do not.
No, I don't either.
There are these levels, and we both would feel it. You and I both understand that saying I love Black people is a very challenging thing to say, and I'm going to be like, it is not. It is, you know, again, we can't bring love into the workplace. There's this whole thing, and we're just sitting here saying, here's my friends. I'm allowed to say I love them. It's an interesting feel. Like, what is that about? That there is literally like, oh, can she say that?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure on that specific angle of you know, saying or not saying love,
but follow me. And
but I think, though, to your point, and I think where we're, you know, we're having some overlap is, so as a former teacher and a writing teacher, and also as a writer and a communicator, storyteller, like, so understanding the power and the craft and the nuance of words and stories and who's telling them and how and when and what context, and is it oral, is it silent, is it written, you know, all these different things that go into it. I'm a big fan of show, not tell. So to your point, of course, you know, and it's if you're on LinkedIn or wherever your forums are, you know, or your platforms, there are going to be times when you need to instruct or educate or, you know, whatever. But really, the power is just going out and doing it and not even saying anything about it. And it's kind of a meta thing, right? Because sometimes you do have to say something about it, but it's just like, oh yeah, here's my friend. I love him. I love her. Here's my colleague. Hey, you want to go get lunch? Hey, you want to go get a beer? Hey, like, and just normalizing. But I think the challenge is if you're further, if you're not as far along on your journey as, and I'm not saying like, oh, Deb and I are so woke and stuff, but you know, we think about this stuff and we committed to it, right?
It's something we have committed to thinking about.
Right. So if you haven't yet, you might need a little more, I don't know what the word is, hand-holding, encouragement, nudging to help be made aware that your thinking, your default thinking is biased. So for example, for me, hey, like if I look at my neighbors, well, actually they just moved, but the neighbors that just moved, a Black woman and an Asian man and 3 biracial kids. I'm very conscious that as far as I know on my street, you know, 6 houses either way. So you're talking 20, 25 homes, that she is the only Black person. So I'm not going to like make that the center of our conversation ever, really, unless she brings, you know, but I'm aware of that. And I would guess that probably very few other people on my street are. And if they are made aware of it, they might, you know, who knows what their response would be, but that's not going to be a thing for them to think about. So when you, and that's just one example. So you take it in the workplace, you take it on social media, you take it, you know, so you have to, I think there is, and I don't want to say meet people where they're at. I don't like that phrase. But you do have to understand where people are and find ways to help them along if they need it, which most people do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the question as I see it is, okay, Black people are definitely a minority. We're talking about 12%. Redheads are 2% of the global population.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to be, if we're just talking about a construct like race, I can promote redheads to a race, 2% of the global population, a much more tiny signal. So have I, as a redhead, really ever needed anyone to support my redheadedness? when I kind of come back to this, it's this thing that, again, there's no definitive way to say how do we get from wanting to specifically offer support to somebody who is a minority, or letting it just like it's not noticeable, you know, in this transition period, because it shouldn't be a thing that really needs to be. But we know, if we're woke, that in some way, shape, or form, knowing which neighbor she could truly come to in an emergency is a part of living in around 2020. We'd like it to just be that she could go to absolutely any neighbor. But there is some, within her, she's had to learn that perhaps as much as people smile, it would not be safe to show up and knock on the door at 2 a.m. That there would not be, and 100% she could go to any neighbor who seemed to have a light on. These are really challenging questions. This is why, as a philosopher, I believe much more complex dialogue needs to happen at the socio-cultural level. It can't happen in the workplace. But who's paying for this kind of discussion happening in our culture? That's where I see entertainment. I'm going to sort of look at myself as a stand-up philosopher. Get on stage and pretend like I'm Dave Chappelle. And in fact, I'm actually trying to get Dave Chappelle to work with me, because I think that busts everything. If somebody just gets a picture, low to me and goes, Dave Chappelle's gonna rip her a new one. And I, as you can quite tell, I got that. Chappelle gonna be like, all right. So that to me is, again, watching someone as strongly opinionated as himself and myself actually negotiate a civil dialogue, and we will have some fun. I am telling, I actually have a set of a dissolve-free.
I would love to see that.
You actually may. It's been on YouTube since October. I need to redo it because I've lost like 70, 80 pounds since then.
Oh, wow.
Part of my whole thing about loving the virus and being like one of the people that I see that are just like, okay, this has done so much work for us. This is now, I can't let go of this opportunity to go be myself in the world, because I can basically ignore a lot of things. That many parts, again, are the economic stranglehold on institutionalized racism can crumble now of its damn self. The companies, we don't know. The virus is as infectious to companies as to humans. We don't know what companies are going to go bankrupt this summer. It's going to keep happening in waves. There's going to be cycles. And I think at least 40% of companies are going to disappear off the face of the earth. I'm looking at the prediction.
Yeah.
And how I'm thinking about it is, the ones who want to survive need what I'm selling, which is life-centric decision making. It's going to be the companies who started doing the work. So back into, you know, the framework of the work you do, the companies who know that it is humans first, the companies who are going to be flexible enough to say, okay, everybody stay home. We're not going to see each other until 2021. Let's, you know, the companies who are now doing that, because as a philosopher, we ask, if a tree falls in the forest and you don't hear it, there's no human around. Well, if there's no one sitting in a cubicle, does the corporation exist?
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
Yeah, no, it's so many. I love how your mind works as a philosopher, and just a little asterisk on my philosophy degree. I was not a good student in college. I was a partier. I played sports, so I mean, I do have a philosophy degree, and I do take a lot from that. And I, 25 years later since I've graduated, I think like a philosopher, and logical arguments, and open to criticism and Socratic, solid stuff. But it's not like I'm a philosophical scholar of any renown. But yeah, I mean, I think it does. One thing you said around having these conversations, in a workplace. And I'm part of that, whether I've been in the house or as a consultant. I come in and I'm going to, hey, I'm going to do this training. I'm going to do this coaching. I'm going to facilitate this conversation. I'm going to do this. And, you try and do the best you can. And of course you have, you have internal supporters and people who are bought in, and then you have people who are resistors, and the people like this, and so you have that whole spectrum of receptivity and appreciation for its value. And all those people who work in a company also are people who have social lives and are going to choose to do whatever they're going to choose to do with their free time socially.
Yeah.
And how many of those people are actually going to choose to find communities and events and engagements where this type of conversation is happening? Probably not that many, right? And so I'm not saying work is the place to do the work and bring them into their, but I think there's something to think about, that intersection of, like, I know me personally, I mean, I'm fortunate to live in the Bay Area where there's tons of cultural, political, social opportunities and awareness and events and communities and different things well, not now, obviously we're stuck at home, but just in general, that I can, on any given day, I can go do this stuff and just be in Oakland, in Berkeley, in San Francisco, and all these places. And and of course there are other places. It's not like San Francisco is the only place, but a lot of people don't even live in places where that's available to them. So I'm not making excuses for anyone. I'm just saying that whatever it is, I think I don't know, I think going back to that modeling the normalization, and I just think of my interactions on LinkedIn, which is where we met. I normalize my interacting with Black and brown people, with amplifying voices of Black and brown people, with commenting on their posts, with sharing their posts, with making introductions to people. It's like, and even maybe 10 years ago, even though I was on my journey and it was decent, that would have been something that maybe wouldn't have been as natural or normal for me. So if that's me saying that, where's the person that has no Black friends, has maybe one or two colleagues, and they may be cordial, but there's no real relationship? They aren't in a place where they can do that without feeling. And again, I'm not defending them. I'm trying to look at it objectively. So what needs to be done to get each individual to a place where they can feel comfortable normalizing relationships?
Yeah, I mean, and again, we can talk about my love for Bill Cosby if we want to go to how much I like to go into deep things and really talk about it. You want to? Yeah, because it's joke 6. So I do 5 jokes for Chappelle. So joke 6 is about Cosby. Okay. And the first main point is, I mean, he was America's father in the late 80s.
Oh yeah, I watched the Cosby Show every whatever night it was, Thursday night or whatever.
Yeah, he's done wrong. But a great deal of the societal poison is about this angst of, he was America's father. We keep having men who keep abusing the privilege that they were, and when they're put in a role as the teacher, the father, like he was. And I say that's precisely what went wrong. We have to hold him accountable for the actual crimes. But we can't stop loving the Bill Cosby we knew in the 80s. We have to be mature adults and have the complexity to go both and. Hold him accountable for the crimes. So he was so great. Something caused that. Okay, so here we go into this person who doesn't know any Black people. We're getting into this. How do you reconcile that you want to just say, I'm never, ever, ever going to say Bill Cosby's name again? He did something so heinous that he's written off the books, and yet still have these memories. If it comes up, somebody says Thursday night in the 80s, and you're going Family Ties, and you're all like, I want to talk. You want to talk, okay? The first thing I do is point out very succinctly that America also had a mother. We can immediately pivot to loving Felicia Rashad, okay? We can immediately say that greatness was not in that one man. There was a mother right there. And her actual sister, Debbie Allen, is my official mother. Fame raised me. The racial harmony on the NBC version of Fame is how I became who I am. If I had to, and it, of course, again, this was my journey. Well, I didn't really have to do much work. It just came naturally. But then it was like, well, how did it come naturally? Where was this thing that I grew up with only white people in Ohio, and then I was basically only making friends with Black people at college? Where is this from? It's a great story. It's a kind of story.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
You know, it was, so it comes back again. I mentioned Roxy Roker and Debbie Allen. It was how much the TV show Fame meant to me. I had that screen, I had that other high school. It wasn't like my high school, and my real high school was not a place that I enjoyed going. So in my mind, I'd attend Fame. And race was not a problem. There was like one episode where they had to get rid of a ballet teacher. And again, it went deep into very subtle. Was she being racist? Or was she actually officially saying that the darker skinned girl was not an acceptable ballerina? It was a good episode to kind of go back to the 80s, because we didn't talk about things with so much tension and terminology, and there really was more of a naturalness about it, if I can use that term. And so I think I've lost my train of thought.
It happens.
I get so excited because I don't want to keep talking about all of the episodes of Fame, and then I'm tweeting with Debbie Allen. Debbie Allen did a video not last night, but the night before. Her niece, so Felicia's daughter, Condola Rashad, has a rap out. And
Okay.
Debbie Allen, who's 70 years old, worked that shit. And I filmed myself with dancing next to Debbie Allen. This is the gift of the pandemic, is you can literally get into your playfulness. Mm-hmm. And this is, there's an interim question, but the question, that person who doesn't know any Black people, God damn it, they do. They're interacting with them on the screens, you see. And if they are selecting positive role models, if they're not just being subjected to the low-level messages that are being delivered by mainstream media, if they go into that and they look, there are many lovable people on our screen.
Yeah. I think people have been so I agree. I mean, I didn't have the same kind of relationship with, I mean, I did watch The Cosby Show. It's funny you bring up Family Ties. I have a story, kind of a non-racial story with Family Ties too. If we get to it, I'll share it later. So I totally, and because there were so few media regularly publicly viewable people, Black people in at least in my growing up in the 80s. I was born in 73, so it's like, growing up in the 80s watching sitcoms. I mean, if you look at all the sitcoms of the 80s, like Cosby Show and Cosby Show, right? Like there just wasn't, any other. So there's that. And so, but back to the, the Black person, or the person who doesn't know any Black people, but to your point, they do, but it's that isolation of privilege that prevents them from seeing the humanity and the curiosity. I think a lot of this is curiosity. I know for me, my journey and my kind of evolution of consciousness is really around curiosity. And I realized maybe in my mid to late 20s that, wow, like if I'm actually curious and I just go, you know what, I'm going to go to that book reading tonight. I'm not really a book reading kind of guy, but I'm going to go check that out. Or I'm going to go to that, whatever, that event. Like I've never really gone to a drag show, but I guess I'll go to it. Mm-hmm. And slowly or quickly maybe, but over time, you start to create a new normal for yourself, and you're less worried about what other people think or say. Mm-hmm. And I think for race, a lot of people, and they wouldn't necessarily be able to articulate this, and they probably wouldn't admit it when you bring it to their attention. They don't want to be affiliated or associated with being whatever, over friendly, or having too many Black friends, or being kind of doing Black things. and I know it's, I mean, this sounds ridiculous, and it is, but and again, no one would ever say that, admit it. I mean, maybe some, overt racist would, but, right? But, and so it's that evolving your consciousness where like, that's not even a thing. Like I hang out with whoever I hang out with, whoever's interesting, whatever's interesting to me. And people aren't there yet, a lot of people. And, you can't, and I'm not, again, I know I sound like I'm defending like that. I'm trying to look objectively about like what I understand about psychology and sociology and just all the messaging we've all been getting for however long we've been alive,
So, I'll just go. I mean, again, you and I've lived through the fact that trauma never came up the first like 4 decades of our life. Now everything's about the trauma, right? Being trauma informed is now what every American adult's got to do. And I really believe that it's a trauma. It's a collective trauma, this prejudice of skin color. And I do believe it can resolve like that. I do believe that for each person, that might be different. But that, again, there are so many heart-centered people doing such a horrific job going, I don't see skin color. Oh, no, you've lied. You're there trying to do some positive work and you've just lied out your damn face. Completely, utterly lying. How do we have an honest conversation built on a lie? Humans have an immense amount of our brain is recognizing faces, is recognizing features, right? This is, it's absolutely impossible. And back to, I like to say, I'm really, and this is a movie that I'm writing, because I want to stop with white and black and this and that, and I want to go to Arctic hued and equatorial hued. I want to use the latitude of the globe. I mean, this is back to science. So again, I talk about melanin a little bit, and I talk about skin color is based on latitude, from equatorial hued. And so there are much lighter skinned people in South Africa, which is where most Americans will think. People are much lighter skinned in South Africa than they are in Nigeria because of Africa's so big and there's so much distance from the equator. It's very similar. It is something that, again, for the research for my movie, I realized something. So I was going to go over and I was going to do well, like I did the last time I was there, and it was 96. I went to celebrate Mandela's presidency. It was the most marvelous thing that happened. Got just a couple of statues and some stuff. So again, a lot of, when I look at the white people who will talk about being in Africa, they went as missionaries or as NGOs, they went for these things. I just went because
you were interested, you were curious.
Deb was curious, and Deb had already had plenty of experience that there would be no problem, that I'm going to be interacting with humans, and I'm just as safe as I would be anywhere else on the globe, where I can communicate in English as the major language. It's really funny because it's like people keep wanting me to put the but there in this story. And I just keep going and going and going.
There's no but.
There's no but. I'm here. I mean, there isn't anything I can say that went wrong. It was the loveliest vacation possible. And it comes down to, we're all experiencing all this trauma. And the way to get past the trauma is love. Because again, I'm in this unique position. You can't start from the love necessarily in a job situation. But when you, again, like you said, demonstrate, don't tell. I'm going to do both, because I'm out here in the world in this unique position as a philosopher going, if I'm not capable of entertaining a deep discussion of opposites, of very controversial stuff, what's the person, where's the job, how are we going to get better when we're all being very politically correct and polite and we're lying? It's still quite common that they want to say they don't see skin color. And appreciating from Arctic hue to equatorial hue, understanding the complexity that skin color is about health. The latitude that you historically, the median of your ancestors is what your skin color is. And that tells you something about how much sunlight you need. The epidemiological studies about vitamin D are very clear. Basically, if you're not in Florida, continental US is too far north for most people of African descent to have optimal well-being. This is my well-being philosophy. We start, it is so crucial that we stop racism, because it's the only way to get back to being able to talk about dark skin and the gradations of dark skin and white skin. Is we've got to put these discussions back on the table. In the old reality, we're trying to take the discussions away, but there's a big health crisis. And solving human health based on latitude and the sunlight and global warming, we start to actually understand global warming better when we understand why racism is. Because again, humans require energy from the sun, all of us. Those of us who are more northern ancestry, we are supposed to get more of our calories from actually eating. Why there's quite a tendency to gain weight as we get older, and not so much in other places. Because we also can get a great deal of energy from sunlight, not just transduced through our skin, but singing and dancing actually generates sustainable human energy. Dancing, and this is again, I just lost 140 pounds in the 50th year of my life. Dancing completely energizes me. I can stop with all the calories in, and I can use dancing to have a sustainable high. I go ecstatic trance dancing on church on Sunday. And this last week, I exercised my religious freedom for the first time in my life. I went and sat in the parking lot of my church and turned on the tunes I was just outside in the parking lot by myself. It was the most liberating thing I have ever done. Why do we need a congregation? Why do we need all of this? Every single one person can sit there and go, yeah, it's crazy. Skin is skin. It means this. I know it's going to be a risk to step up. But I see Deb. Literally, if people would just see what I write on LinkedIn, people would be like, oh my God. So I have a friend, Belopi. I've known him for 5 years. He's a microbiologist in Botswana. And he's loving it. He's showing up. He's an algaepreneur. Maybe I get this guy an investment in his firm in Botswana. Then I start meeting this guy from Zambia. So he and I are starting to chat, and I can tell his English is not where he wants to be, and I'm like, it's perfectly fine, but he's being a little reserved, and I can see that if people are looking at it, they're not seeing him as a real smart individual. I'm going, no, Deb looks at the profile, Deb can sense there's a human there, she's starting to befriend him. We meet on an Elon Musk post. So I'm holding Elon Musk, I got eyes on both Bezos and Musk and all this racism I'm doing. These two guys are really trying to become trillionaires. And we need some human-based people smart enough to see that. So, as you well know, Musk was like, no, I'm putting my people back to work.
Yeah, he's just
Alameda County.
Just down the road from me.
And then look at this brilliance. He goes, if you can arrest anyone, just arrest me. Now, I got to admire the player in that, right? I am not a fan of this guy at all, but that is playership. That is 100%. You just arrest me. So I say in my comment, yeah, like Elon Musk is going to be treated like any other American of South African descent. And I go and I start talking about his extreme wealth owning an emerald mine in Zambia. In comes my friend Mukabu going, what? Where'd you find this? It's the middle of the night. We're not on the same time zone. He goes and finds the Wikipedia article. It's the reference of my spouting off about his dad owning a Zambian emerald mine. Here we are he's actually works in a mine. I've now asked him to think about and write about what that means. Because again, everyone in America is going, oh, Elon Musk is such a great humanist. He's got a background that what he's trying to do to the workers in Alameda is precisely the dehumanization that was happening in the goddamn emerald mine that his father owned. Precisely the same thing. It's a lot prettier. And But it's the exact same contempt for people who get paid this amount of money versus the amount of money he's in command of. He has to keep making that much money. He is so entitled. He can take.
That's his choice.
I mean, I don't even know how many people, and it's this disease of people who are just praising him and praising him. So I can come in and say, player played, when he said, I'm the only one to get arrested, and then I'm done. That's enough, as I'm seeing both sides of this little particular move, where he's saying, Gavin, fuck yourself. He's literally saying he's more important than the entire state of California.
Mm-hmm. And he's won so far, or at least, the latest.
He's putting thousands of lives in jeopardy. We do not have the science. Masks do not. There's as a philosopher, the lack of people actually knowing what a virus is, how it's transmitted, what precisely the masks are doing or not doing. We cannot send people back to work in this society because Black people are going to be killed. Black men are going to go extinct over this whole, do they wear a mask or do they not wear a mask? There is so much, how does America demand Black men go to work when what's going to happen when they're masked? It is unbelievably complex that no matter what they do. So in some cases, they're going to try and seem to not be, so they can't wear hoodies. I mean, you certainly can't wear a mask and a hoodie. That's certain death. So what's going to happen is we go out and do the right thing kind of summer. What's going to happen in Philly and New York and DC this summer? I'm telling all my friends, just please stay in. Just because I just saw a video on Twitter yesterday of a Red Lobster in York, Pennsylvania, all white people, and they just went into battle. The woman didn't get her like Cheddar Bay biscuits or whatever the fuck was going on. The white fragility of this summer with no real leadership, with nothing but concerns about corporation, America might not be around for much longer. When as racially informed people, if we really understand this, we've got a very horrific situation. And the more within the tech community, it's like keep people home. The more it's like in the health, there are actually two different adaptations. There is an East Coast and a West Coast virus. I'm now pretty philosophically certain. If you think about the migration, if you think about how quickly the one mutated through Africa and Europe and came to the East Coast, and one mutated through Asia and came to us. We had the very first death here in the Seattle area on February 21st. It took days before New York was in like complete, you start to think, oh, well, that was the domestic travel, but it doesn't make sense. It's coming at us, and there's now, again, the scientists have shut up. The scientists are so far behind the game that people who were talking in March and early April have all went completely silent. And what that tells me, and so I have virologists here at Red Hutch. I mean, I am just, as a philosopher in my prime here, I'm getting valid premise after valid premise going, this must mean this must mean that. And it's the energy, right, of having lost the weight, of having discovered how to heal the mold exposure. And it's this truth telling. It was back to where I said singing and dancing, it's sustainable energy. When you're a human who knows whatever comes out your mouth is your truth, that I can handle. And however, if you get upset, if you go, Deb, that can't, oh, Deb, that's up. Okay, I can take it because I'm speaking my own truth. I'm 100% integrated in my own experiences. I'm not trying to please anyone. I don't have a boss or a corporation who might be monitoring what I say. I'm supposedly an American, right? This is this thing about exercising religious freedom. If you're out in the parking lots, what's so special about going in the building and sitting in a hard, why? Nobody's using their brain to be creative, to just say, if church is that important to you, go do a tailgate. Isn't that the American way?
Yeah, well.
People are so fearful that I feel like I'm the only human going, oh, we could do this. There's just, we're going to have to get creative in this transition period and back into our childlike, like, you're going to love this. Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, they have been toasting me. Because look at what I'm going to say. As of March 2020, nothing exists conceptually.
Only since March 2020?
Nothing exists conceptually. So basically, the other way I state that, precedent has left Earth. You see, we're just wasting time. Why Elon is in a pissing match with Gavin is because he has realized cars have went extinct. So, you know, there'll be some places where we'll get more, but he's realized this is the end of the solo car and the projections he's made. The projections he's made about his increase in wealth is, and then he's realizing, how the hell is he going to get the Mars thing done? I mean, he could have done it, but now in this, he's not going to possibly be able to single-handedly step away. And Deb goes, can I get him a message? Okay, because I don't hate him. I just see that his intelligence is locked up in the bottom line of these companies, that he's the titular head of. Whereas my intelligence is just like, I got a friend in Zambia. If that man tried to make his Mars city in the Sahara, then he'd become a trillionaire. If he put that effort in that, he's still making all his money if he did it in Africa. If he built that next level human city built full of tech in Africa. Now, if you have the balls that Deb Helfrich does, it doesn't seem like he probably will.
I think that gets back to something we've been talking about, you know, this whole time, is that's part of the racism. I mean, that'd be a hard direct connection. Elon Musk is a racist because he won't build his station, and so, you know, but to think like that's not even
perception. Neither one of us is judging us. We don't know, but we're saying he's within this blind spot that he couldn't possibly think about that. And that is racism. That is the impenetrableness of it, is how it's just the fabric of all of our thinking. Right from the start, if the Constitution says all men are free, okay, you just ignore 50% of the population right there. And then you really meant only this kind of looking man. When that is where you keep going, this is the height of our country. And these things were meant to evolve. It was not meant, they clearly did not think that it would end up being this rigid thing, that there was really supposed to be an evolution, and it just didn't happen.
Or maybe they did, and it was intentional.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not saying like a, you know, they predicted every single decade and this and that, but like, I mean, when I think about, you know, sometimes when I'm having discussions, especially with Black or brown people, and I'll say the more astute and a little bit more firm people will say, Jared, this is all intentional. White supremacy isn't an accident. It's not, you know, it might be covert and it might be, you know, subtle, but it's very intentional. And so, you know, can we say, like, from 70s, that, you know, they're looking ahead 250 years to say, like, we hope it's this way then? You know, I don't know. But if you look at everything through history and the changes, you know, you read books like White Rage by, I forget her name. She teaches at Emory. Anyway, like, every time there's some sort of progress, slavery ends. Great. Well, there's white rage to say, okay, so this ends, right? And so now, you know, we get a Black president, right? So there's this white rage, this rebuttal every time. And so I think that's the work.
Well, and to me, that work is demolishing corporate hegemony.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, because, Dr. Kendi very clearly equates racism and capitalism. And, this model that, as far as I see it, so my brand of philosophy, well-being philosophy, I use evolutionary logic principles. And I apply them not just to the evolution of species, but to the evolution of consciousness, to the evolution of human societies. And so to understand this really, really well, and do we need to look at time for you?
Pretty soon, yeah.
Yeah, no.
I can probably go about five minutes after 3:30.
So I'll just go really quickly that industrialization is what has codified the capitalistic mentality of, the hierarchies and only certain people who look this way are running things. And it's a fear-based mentality. And we just simply, again, back to the trauma, you get out of that mentality, you start talking about these things with love. You start, again, I think if you were to say that most of your conversations, you end up like in a détente, you end up needing more conversations, more work. When Deb's having a conversation, people like, I learned something. There's an aha. I don't actually know what I'm going to remember from what she said, but there was enough there that this has really moved my dial forward. And people feel energized. They feel some hope, some inspiration, is this different approach. I know we're ready for the spark of people who've done the work, who are much more legion than we even know, to see somebody just being utterly natural about race, of facing it and going, we're all in it together. It's the, the capitalism, our bosses are our overseers. We're in cubicle captivity. And it's that fear of not being able to keep the roofs over our head that have kept institutional racism locked in. There are some people who are really ignorant, and they're in the middle of the country and they have real economic issues. It all comes back to me, it's every American for themselves. No American has time to be really civic minded. And that has to become your job in a certain way, or else there's too much notifications, there's too much this, that, and the other thing. If we fix the fact that Americans are so scared of losing their job, that it's so hard to have economic stability, no matter what your skin color is, no matter anything, which is just 1% of the people, 8 guys got 50% of the globe's wealth. And then they're now saying, my factory's more important, and I don't care whether my warehouse guys get ill or not. We cannot have Bezos and Musk with this sort of power. And that's what corporate America has given them. And they're not evil people. They're just playing the game the way the game is legally allowing them to play. Mm-hmm. Fix that, and we fixed racism. I guarantee it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to end.
Yeah, it's lovely talking to you. I'm always here. Yeah, we could probably do a webinar. If that's not my thing, but if you would like to, try and get a paid webinar so that we get people who are really committed, to want to they need to get some rage out, but they want to end on a real positive note. We might have a real serious ticket there.
Well, let's stay in touch and explore what we might do.
Have a lovely day, Jared. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate it and enjoyed it. So thank you for inviting me.
Okay. And this is going right up on YouTube. I'll send you the URL.